Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Raven Renee. If you're new, welcome. If you're not, thanks for joining me once again. So today's video is another installment in my faith journey series. And so we have another testimony to share. So this one is going to be about how God blessed me with my apartment in 3 days. So this happened. I've been in my apartment now for almost a year. And so I believe that God is now prompting me that it's now time to actually share this testimony with others, outside of my personal sphere, right? And so I hope that this blesses you, that this encourages you, and know that God is faithful. So I'm just going to share. If I'm looking around, that's because I have my notes, okay? Because we have times, we have dates, and all the things. So yeah, I'm just going to get right into this testimony. So I first off want to start by sharing that I had been looking at apartments, compiled like my lists and saved places and looking at different cities because this would be, kind of a big move for me. This would be my first apartment, and I'd be moving from my hometown where I'm from. And so I'd be moving a few hours away. And so I was looking, doing my research. I had all of my non-negotiables, my requirements for what I wanted in an apartment. I had my budget and all of that, right? And so I had already, gotten all that stuff together. However, my family was mentioning on how I should look or use like an apartment locator, because my cousin had used one and they were helpful. And they were mentioning that, they may have like certain deals that you may not know about. So I honestly kind of shrugged them off. I'm like, I don't need to use an apartment locator. But I eventually ended up using one. And so I reached out to one, and fast forward a bit to April 27th, 2022, right? So this is on a Wednesday. And the apartment locator sends me a list of 10 apartments that he found. And so he sends me this on Wednesday, April 27th. And when I tell you, I did not like any of those apartments. They were all no's. Like, they were just not it. First of all, I didn't like many of them. And then also, the majority of the ones he sent me were outside of my budget. Like, and you give the apartment locator a budget and all these things. And so they were outside of my budget. And so, yeah, the apartment locator ended up not working out as far as them not giving me anything to work with. So, however, I still was planning on driving to, the new city or area that I'd be moving, to view apartments. I wanted to tour apartments that weekend. And so now it's Wednesday and I don't have any apartments to tour. So literally after that Wednesday night and Thursday, I felt like I was just scrambling, trying to find places and call places that had availabilities to tour, because especially at that time, a lot of apartments didn't have availability to tour on the weekends. And so yeah, I was calling around and I eventually called. And I do want to mention that, I was getting a bit discouraged and kind of worried and stressed. But I was really trying not to, because I knew that God had me, that it was all going to work out. But in that moment, I was kind of going through it a bit. So I ended up calling an apartment on Thursday, April 28th, to see if they had any availabilities for that Saturday, because that's when I would be driving to tour apartments. And so I called them at 5:41 p.m. Mind you, they close at 6 on weekdays. So I called and I spoke to a woman, and she basically said that there were no availabilities for the floor plan that I was looking at. And so I hung up, or so we hung up from that phone call, and she literally calls me back 16 minutes later at 5:57 p.m. Mind you, they close at 6. She calls me at 5:57 p.m. or 5:57 p.m. saying that someone just told her that they wouldn't be renewing their lease and that the unit would be available that next day, Friday morning, on the portal to apply for. And so, literally, literally just 3 minutes before they're closing, she calls me back and she tells me that, they open at 9 and that the listing would be up by 10 a.m. that morning. And so, after that call, I already knew. But after that call, I already felt like that was God and that He had set the whole thing up, because there's already no way, because I called and then she called me back 16 minutes later saying that an apartment just became available. It was like, okay. And, I don't believe in coincidences because God is very intentional. He already has everything worked out, everything planned out. And just how it happened, I knew that that was God providing for me. I also want to mention that Isaiah 43:19, God has been bringing that scripture up to me. And that also reminds me of what I felt with knowing that that apartment was just already me and that was God providing for me. The scripture basically talks about, like, God is doing something new and, like, it's already begun. Like, do you not see it? you know? And so in that moment, it just reminds me of how God will literally, like, give you insight and let you know, like, that He is doing something new, like what He's doing. And it's like you will feel it, you will know. And I think that that kind of goes with what I was feeling. Like, I was already knew that that was God doing something. Like, there's something going on here, and, like, this is Him providing for me. And so I encourage y'all to read or study Isaiah 43:19. That's something that He's been having me read and just study and hold on to recently. So yeah, I just wanted to include that in here as well. And so I made sure to download all of my needed documents and get all that stuff together. And so I also want to mention that okay, so that was Thursday. And so moving on to Friday, I got up, Friday morning, and I was up early checking to see if the listing, was posted. And it was posted before 10 a.m. So it ended up posting early, and I had my application submitted by 9:25, okay, that morning. And so I called them because at the end of the application, it said to call them, I guess, just to share that you had submitted your application so they can be aware of it, or, like, be on the lookout for it. And so I did that. And they said that I should have a decision by the end of that day. So Friday evening, basically. So, of course, throughout that entire day, I'm, constantly checking my email and their website. And I was believing that the apartment was already mine. And so, however, that next day, that Saturday, I was already planning on touring apartments. So I still was going to go and look at apartments. And so I ended up changing some of the times for the tours I had set up, and I ended up scheduling a tour for the place that I applied to. Even though I wasn't going to be able to tour my specific unit, or even the floor plan that I would be getting if I got the apartment, I still wanted to still go see the area and all of that. And so Saturday comes and I have 3 apartment tours set up. And so I want to go back a little bit because Friday, after I applied to the apartment, I think it was on Friday where I was in the shower and I literally just felt the Holy Spirit. Like that just God was so with me. Like I believe that I felt that so tangibly. And I literally was just crying in the shower while I was actually praying for others while I was in the shower, and I was literally just bawling, crying. And I just I don't know, I just knew that God was with me. And so now Saturday comes and I'm driving, a few hours to go and look at, apartments. And so we end up going to like a couple cities for the different apartment tours. And so the first place that we go to, it met some of the criteria, but it wasn't it. Like it was that dorm style, but there was no elevators. And also the model that they had there, it was more expensive, and also the connection was horrible. And especially at the time I was working from home, so I need, some good connection, and it was horrible. Literally the mobile data out there, like non-existent. So that was a no right there. And so we went to tour the second property, and this one I was very surprised. I was very surprised when we pulled up because I did not expect it to look so nice, and I honestly thought it would look older and more like a traditional apartment, especially based off of some of the reviews. And while looking at apartments, a lot of apartments have horrible reviews, and that's one thing that I was really looking at and taking into consideration. And so even based off of some of the reviews from this place, I was thinking of taking it off the list to make room for another property, but the other property ended up not having availabilities to tour. And so I went to this one, and I'm glad that I did, because I was not going to go to it, but I was pleasantly surprised. And this one, the price, it wasn't horrible. It was above my budget, but I could make it work. And they had a nice move-in date. The apartment, or the unit that I would have got, was on the first floor. It had a courtyard view. It had the wood flooring extending into the living room, and it was just really nice. And so after viewing that one, me and my friend who went with me, we just drove around the neighborhoods because we had time before the last appointment. And so we kind of rode around, and literally all of the houses, all the neighborhoods were really nice. And I remember that was something that really stood out to me, or really stood out to the both of us. Because safety and just really nice area, something that was really important to me, and it was just really nice. And so now we arrive at the last apartment tour, which is the one that I applied to the day before. And literally when getting there, the inside was beautiful, and the person that was at the front desk was actually the person who had looked at my application. And so when I said my name, she remembered that name. And so I think even that right there was God, and allowing her to be the one that I come into contact with, especially if she's the one reviewing the applications, because she was able to put a face, with the name, and be able to just kind of get to know me a bit right outside of just my application. And so, they didn't have the unit available to tour, but I was able to see something bigger on the first floor. And so I did that in this apartment. Again, really nice. I had everything that I desired in an apartment. The area, very safe. And it had the elevators, it had the parking garage, just everything that I would want, and even more than I, would have even thought of. So, and after viewing a unit, I wasn't going to ask about my application because I didn't want to come across pushy. But, and I think I even told my friend, like, when we got there in the beginning, I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm asking about application. I don't know. But as we were finishing the tour, I I decided to ask, like, when would I be hearing back, or when can I expect to hear back about my application or a decision? And the person let me know that I would hear back on or by Monday, or that I would hear back on Monday. And so that was that. And me and my friend, we went and stopped at Chick-fil-A to get us something to eat, to rest a little bit before I'd be driving back, right? Because we had a few hours drive back. And so we stopped at Chick-fil-A, and while we were sitting in the car and eating, I was honestly going back and forth about if I should apply to the second apartment that we toured, just in case. And so I also got on the phone with my mom, and we were talking about it as well. And I thought I was going to fill out the application for the second apartment, but then I just decided to wait and give it until Monday so that I could hear back from the place that I already applied to. And so I finally settled on that, and I kind of surrendered it to God. So I basically surrendered that security blanket, or backup, honestly, because we go back to Thursday. Even when I got off the phone with that person from the apartment, I already knew that was God, and I felt it in my spirit that, like, this was God and that was my apartment. I was already believing that that was mine. But in this moment, because I didn't have a sure answer, I wanted to have a security blanket. I wanted to have a backup plan, but already feeling like that apartment was for me. But because I didn't have a sure answer, I was like, should I apply to the other place? So I decided to just surrender it and let go of that security blanket, and that if this place was for me, it's going to work out, and if not, then this other place will hopefully still be there, or God has something better. And so I drove off from Chick-fil-A, and we went and stopped to get some gas. So went to fill up on gas, and mind you, the gas station that we stopped at to fill up was right across from the apartment that I applied to, literally right across the street. so I parked at the pump, and I looked at my phone, and I had gotten an email from the apartment that I applied to saying that my request was approved. And they also were saying some other stuff, so I was just trying to make sure that, like, did I read that correctly? Is this what that is? And it was. So I got the apartment, and I actually received the email at 6:05 p.m. So mind you, this is after hours, because on the weekends they close even before 6 o'clock. So I received this email after hours that same day. And mind you, we had basically just left from the apartment tour. We were probably like their last tour of the day. And the person told me that I wouldn't hear back until Monday. So I received the email at 6:05. Granted, I didn't see the email until 6:17 when I was right across the street from the apartments getting gas. And so even in that, God is so just in the details. Because the fact that I received the email at 6:05 means that I got the email when I was either still going back and forth in the Chick-fil-A parking lot being like, should I apply to this other place? Should I not? Or it was at the moment that I had actually just been like, you know what? I surrender it to God. So, but again, mind you, I'm still like, if it was when I was still going back and forth in the Chick-fil-A parking lot, me not knowing that it was already done. And I just had to believe it. I just had to hold on to what God has shared with me. And so, and then for him to allow me to see it and for me to stop at the gas station right across from the apartments, because I could have, drove on to a different area, but God allowed me to stay in that area for a little bit for him to just reveal it to me in that way and be right across from the apartments, looking at the apartments that were already mine. And so God is just so faithful. And so I also want to mention that, the apartment. So at this point, I got the apartment. And so he didn't allow me to settle whatsoever. And so literally this apartment has everything that I desired. It had all the things that I needed that were like my non-negotiables, and even more that I didn't even know would be just convenient for me. Like, it has the white cabinets. It has the island, which was a non-negotiable for me. It has the nice windows, and the area is very safe, and the elevators that the first apartment didn't have, and just the location being perfect for me. Even the city that I'm in, I didn't know much about the city before moving here, but after, looking around the area and just seeing everything and even reading about it and all of that stuff, it's like the location was even perfect. And so, and also because I wasn't even really thinking about this area, like I wasn't really looking at this area before. So, even me being like just close to all these different things and stores that I personally like or would need, he literally just gave me everything that I needed and desired and more. And so I also want to share that, again, he did not allow me to settle for less. I didn't have to settle whatsoever. Even things that maybe could have looked like not his best, he flipped it to where it is. So, for example, like, when I was looking at apartments, I had like a square footage that I was, thinking at it that I would prefer. And so my apartment now, it's technically it's smaller in square footage. However, he made up for it with the really high ceilings and the really big windows. And so my apartment seems so much bigger than it actually is. And so that one thing that, it's like, oh, well, I would have preferred a bigger place, he made up for it. And so it's like, he really did not allow me to settle on anything. Like, nothing was left unchecked. God is in every single detail. And so at this point, I was really just like, it's the details for me. Like God is really in, in every single thing. And and so even God using the apartment locator, right? Because the apartment locator, it didn't work out as far as them finding me an apartment, but God even used that for my good because he allowed it not working out with the apartment locator to actually get me in position to call this place when I did, because I needed to call on that day because that's when the apartment that I have now became available. He used that for timing and positioning. And so there is literally no detail was lost. And so we may think like, oh, well, this didn't work out, or, it's like, oh, well, this was for nothing. But it's like, no, God can literally use everything. He works all things together. And so, yeah, he even used the apartment locator. And also, another thing that I want to mention is, my mom didn't go with me. And, she would have been with me, but she ended up not being able to go. And so my friend ended up coming with me. And so, I knew and I just felt that her coming was going to be like really good for her. But I didn't know like really why, or like what all God had in store for her when it came to this. But even him using that was just, it was just amazing. And so I also want to share another way that God just worked everything together, was even down to my lease start date. So my lease start date being when I first moved, July 8th, right? And so God gave me the original date that I had set in my heart that I wanted to move. And so, originally I said I wanted to move either July 1st or July 8th when I was kind of looking at apartments and looking at the different dates that they had available. I was like, okay, July 1st or July 8th, those seem like good dates for me to move. And with July 8th probably being the better option, since July 1st of 2022 was that 4th of July weekend. And so, and while looking at different places, I had moved dates up and just became more flexible with the date that I wanted to move based off of what I was seeing, based off of what was available. But he literally gave me the original date that I wanted and the better of the two. And so even that was just like, oh yeah, we're not settling at all. God is doing everything. God is doing everything. So even with the apartment that I got being the nicest apartment that I viewed, but it also being the one that was truly within my budget and had the best ratings. Because like I mentioned before, a lot of these apartments had horrible ratings. But this apartment had the best ratings out of any apartment that I saw. And I looked at a lot of apartments online. At the time that I went to view this apartment, it had like a 4.8 or 4.9 out of 5 stars rating. So yeah, it was truly, I was just truly blessed because I was just so amazed. And mind you, all of that happened with the apartment in 3 days. I called the apartment. They said that there was nothing available, and then she called me back saying that there was. That was Thursday. Friday, I applied, and Saturday, I got the apartment. So I literally was like, I left to go to the city and where I'd be moving. I left by faith of provision to Troy's apartments, and I came back with the provision. Or like, I left by faith with a promise, and I came back with the promise, And so, and I got the apartment on the last day of the month, April 30th. And so it was like, what a month. What a month. And I also want to mention that I was actually on a fast. And so, because in 2022, I was doing this thing where I would fast like the last 3 days of the month. And so I was doing this for a good amount of months in 2022. And so I was actually on like my annual monthly fast while he did this. And one thing that I also want to mention that was just another piece of what God did was that 7 days before I got my apartment. So I got my apartment April 30th. On Saturday, April 23rd, at 6:03 p.m. So basically 1 week before I got the apartment, I was at the park writing in my journal, and I felt God prompt me to write that it's still bamboo season and unexpected acceleration plus overflow. And so, mind you, I had already written my whole journal entry, and I wrote this like off to the side. And so I wrote this not knowing that literally 7 days later, he would complete what he spoke to me. And also the fact that I got the apartment around the same time at 6:05 p.m. the next Saturday. And so literally that unexpected acceleration, at the time, I didn't know what that meant. I just felt God prompt me to write that down. But I didn't know what he was referring to. But he was literally referring to my apartment. I didn't know that the apartment locator wasn't going to work out. And so literally the unexpected acceleration was him giving me my apartment, working everything out in 3 days. Like, and it's just so beautiful to know that God was literally speaking to me the entire time, guiding me through. And so he literally, like, he eased all of my worries. Remember, like, in that time, I was trying not to be discouraged. I was trying not to be worried, not knowing that days before, he had already given me a word. Like, that is just so beautiful to me. Yeah. And so there's a lot to this story, but by what I've shared, or this testimony rather, but by what I have just shared with you, I hope that you can even just see, by the little bit that I've shared, how God was in every single detail, orchestrated everything, eased all of my worries, and gave me even more than I could have even thought or imagined, and just made it even better. So God is faithful. He fulfills his promises, and this is why this situation with him giving me my apartment is why I say, if you've watched any of my other videos or follow me on social media or just know me in person, this is why I always say to never settle for less than God's will and his best for you, because that is what he taught me through this situation, because he did not allow me to settle. Like, he gave me his best. And that's something that I will always remember and always have as a testament to go back on and remember that he does it. And he doesn't skimp out on anything. He is in all the details. So yeah, that is my testimony of how God blessed me with my apartment in 3 days. So I hope this encourages you to keep trusting God, because we serve a big God. He's vast. He cannot be contained. So don't limit God. So I love y'all. I'll see you in the next one. Be sure to subscribe for more. Bye, y'all.